And recording in progress.
This is
Well,
Jay Michaels. Ladies and gentlemen, if you know me for about 15 minutes, then you know I'm a devotee of off Broadway and the underground movements and everything historic about live theater in New York. And to meet someone who was actually there is an honor for me and a thrill, I hope you will agree, for all of you. Here to elucidate us about the world of the underground, if you will, of the 1970s is, and now if I look at his bio, I'm telling you about this very normal Richard William Coldewin, a baby boomer who played Mr. McAfee in Bye Bye Birdie in high school, ended up being part of the notorious, glorious, and famous group the Cockettes, which took California by storm and 50 years ago took New York by storm as well. And they are coming back September 9 to the Public Theater, the perfect place for them in Joe's Pub. Scrmbly, so nice to meet you. Welcome aboard.
thank you. Nice to meet you, Jay.
Now I've divulged your nickname. Let's start with you. How did you go from Richard William Coldewin, a high school performer, into being part of the Cockettes and being called Scrmbly?
Drugs. Well, you know, when you start smoking pot in 1964 and then maybe take a little LSD here and there, you know, as a
chaser,
as a spiritual practice.
God.
And then in 1967, you're living in San Francisco with your lover, and some guys come down from Alaska and they crash at your apartment, and they have to name you something. They came up with Scrmbly. They thought that described me. And then a couple of years later, I moved into a large, we won't call it a commune, it was not that formal, but a large house where a lot of people lived. And they introduced me as Scrmbly, their particular nickname for me. So it stuck. That was a year before the Cockettes happened. And of course, when the Cockettes happened, I was Scrmbly in all my Scrumbliness.
That's Andy Warhol tells the story. They misspelled his name somewhere, and he just let it stay. So I guess I guess you have the same auspicious opening. Someone just said this is Scrmbly, and here we are years later, and it's still there. That's great. Was there any reason? Was there any? It just Scrmbly just seemed the right thing to call you.
Well, this is a little weird, but you know, they asked me. They were trying to nickname me Camerata, and I went, give me a break. Camerata. So I said, well, one particular LSD trip, the word that seemed to sum everything up was a made-up word, Scrombit. You know how it gets.
Of course.
I don't know.
I do.
So
yeah.
they took Scrombit and corrupted it into something that sounded more like a name.
Okay, so that fateful LSD trip just made history. Wow. Okay, speaking of history, okay, Scrmbly walks into the Cockettes. How did the Cockettes get started, and how did you get started with the Cockettes?
Well, Hibiscus, first of all, the midnight movies. The midnight movies in San Francisco were the place to go on weekends at midnight. And because if you loved movies, you were liable to see all these different experimental films, plus a Busby Berkeley film, or something like The Women, or, you know, something crazy like eventually they showed that was the first showing of Night of the Living Dead was at the Palace Theater at midnight. And we would just go there and sort of become part of the crowd. It became kind of a scene. And then there was a costume contest on Halloween 1969, and some of the future Cockettes took part in that. And then actually the name was coined on New Year's Eve by one Ralph Sauer, who was living with Hibiscus in a large commune. Irving Rosenthal was the head of it. And Hibiscus was sort of a Johnny Appleseed of joy, except he would throw, old flowers instead of, they'd collected from the florists, so they'd throw them away the night before into these large bins. And he'd go around and get these, and he'd take off on the streets and into Golden Gate Park and just be flinging flowers everywhere and singing and, wearing glitter and so forth and these robes. And he was kind of a freaky Jesus with makeup and stuff. And we just went, my God, yes. And then he was coming around to the communes and baking bread. And he was just an amazing personality. And he drew people together. And he drew some various people. There was even an accountant who was driving us. We all went to his commune, the Cauliflower Commune it was called, and got in drag and went to the palace and danced to Rolling Stones' Honky Tonk Woman, and the crowd went crazy. So after that, we were called the Coquettes because Ralph said, well, after all, that's all we think about, right? So rather than the Rockettes. And there were two women in the group. They were all, it's all kinds of various people, not just the queens off the street.
Right.
But like-minded people. And we were very
That's really brilliant.
From that get-go, we were very inclusive. There was not a star system, or at least there wasn't supposed to be. Sometimes it just kind of happened. But non-competitive. It was a total alternative to theater, to regular, standard American theater. Was the concept that, well, yeah, if you want to get up in front of people, get up. And sometimes people would come out of the audience and join us on stage.
Oh, that's great. The original interactive, if you will.
Yes.
So Busby Berkeley, experimental films, Night of the Living Dead, and Honky Tonk Women. We have the Coquettes. That's really brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, September 9 at the Public Theater, Joe's Pub. Come and see the momentous return of the Coquettes.